Hi, Sam.
Hey, Peter.
Welcome to What Bitcoin Did.
Thank you.
Good to see you again, man. Last time I saw you was 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
Post win, post celebration.
Well, that doesn't narrow it down for us.
Yeah, you're right.
You were in London, and we had a call, and I was like, dude, do you want to come down to Bedford, watch some football? And you did. And look at you. You're now repping your gear.
I'm all merched out.
What is non-league British football like for you, man?
I part of me expected some Green Street hooligan stuff. Wasn't quite that, but it was pretty close. I mean, fans and players getting at it was amazing, and the refs as well.
Yeah, God, they're so. I don't know who or for whatever reason someone would want to referee at that level, because they go out for 90 minutes,
Yeah.
and everyone shouts and swears at them continually.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those like thankless jobs. You do well, no one actually cares, but if you mess up, everyone suddenly cares.
Yeah, but like sometimes even when they're right, they'll call a foul, and the opposition team will be yelling at them, even though they're right. So like, it is a thankless task, and we're lucky to have the people coming in. But
well, and those linesmen too. The linesmen were, looked like they're pushing 60 or something, but they were there for the love of the game. You could tell.
Well, that's the difficulty, is finding enough people who want to do it, especially at these lower levels. But it was good to see you down there. It's good to have you down to a game. It was a good win, and we're gradually. I'm Bedford pilling people gradually.
Yeah, I am too. Just by proxy, it's almost like I don't know. It's a whole world of pilling people to new league soccer.
Yeah, we need to get Danny to a few more games. He's not been to enough. Anyway, look, it's been great to meet you. I've got to know you not quite well, but a little bit very quickly. Yeah. And we had a good conversation. You told me all about your company. You're going to help us with something for the football team, which we'll get into. But it's been great to get to know you and the product you're making. As soon as you told me about it, I was like, well, you've got to come on the show. And then you started telling me about your backstory. I was like, then you've definitely got to come on the show. And so, look, there's a whole bunch I want to get into. I want to talk about, do you pronounce it Hoseki?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Hoseki. I want to get into Hoseki. I want to explain why the connection is, what you're going to help me with. But, like, can we do your Bitcoin backstory? Because, as you said, this is like your second podcast and your first in-person one.
Yep.
And so a lot of people listening might not know who you are. And so if it's Sailor, we don't have to do that. If it's Max Kaiser, we don't have to. Everybody knows these people. But like when it's somebody who hasn't been on before, I just want to add context. So give people your Bitcoin story.
Yeah, sure. I guess when I first heard about it, well, like a lot of people, I heard about it, didn't really think it was anything. I wasn't into investing at the time. So this was 2014. An investment banking friend of mine told me about Bitcoin. But when I was in college, I studied economics, but I was really interested in geopolitics and sort of like what the world looks like. So investing in an asset wasn't top of mind. My family comes from real estate. So it's like we don't have these really complex, high finance things that we know about or are taught and go into. It's more about just property management and real estate. So I disregarded it. But 2017 came around. I had just left a PhD program in neuroscience, and I wanted to continue that research element because I love doing research. But I'm quite impatient, and neuroscience and basic science medical research really is designed to get drugs into the hands of patients, and that's like a 10-year thing. So I wasn't very patient. And then I saw this crypto scene. This is 2017, and I didn't have money to invest. I had a certain set of skills. I knew how to program, and all of a sudden, this world opened up to me, and that was in Miami. So this was before the whole crypto wave. Miami is where I was raised. Is where I'm from. So I got thrown into that. This is, again, 2017 boom, crypto crazy cycle. So I worked in that space for a bit, kind of understood what this technology is. Orange pilled myself throughout that process. Spent a lot of time at Ethereum conferences, a lot of time then at Bitcoin conferences, and then I could clearly sort of differentiate these two communities and what they're about. That was very apparent pretty quickly.
What stood out? What was the clear difference?
Maybe it's not so colorful literally in the Bitcoin space, which I appreciated. I went to Building on Bitcoin in 2018 in Lisbon, and I met Giacomo, I met the Blockstream team, I met a lot of these cypherpunk people, Sergey from Bitrefill, and that message resonated a lot clear with me. The Ethereum scene was more of like a party scene, more of like a trust fund kid sort of psychedelic infused party, which again is fine. That definitely has its place. I enjoyed that to a certain extent, but the Bitcoin scene was a lot more serious.
Yeah, the way I used to explain it was, as a Bitcoiner, I feel like I'm at Vegas in a meeting, in a glass meeting room, seeing all of the crypto scene out partying outside.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to go party sometimes. It really is attractive. But I think different personalities, kind of gear you towards different groups of people, and ultimately identify with the Bitcoiners a lot. It was a lot stronger.
Yeah.
So yeah, I stayed in that space up until 2019, left to work at Fidelity
Cool.
on Bitcoin research and development. So like a lot of companies that have their own corporate incubator, I worked on open source self-custody solutions, looking at Spectre, for example. So Stepan was incredibly helpful with us. He came and did some workshops. And then I worked on proof of reserves there as well. A bit of Lightning work, but mainly it was open source custody and proof of reserves.
Which led you, therefore, to Hoseki.
Yeah, it's sort of this, when you look back, you realize kind of the stars always aligned. But and now I'm here building a proof of reserves platform.
So I will get into that, but you hadn't talked to me about your PhD in neuroscience.
Well, I didn't get the PhD. I left.
Yeah, but like you started on it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like and the thing that stood out to me there is you said it's about getting drugs into the hands of patients.
Yeah.
Is there any part of that you saw that was kind of you felt that's unethical? And the reason I bring up the question is that we don't have advertising for drugs in the UK. I think maybe they're like, you can do something like Nurofen. I think maybe I've seen Nurofen advertising. But when I come to the US, I've talked about this a lot. You put on the TV, the adverts come on, and there's a lot of adverts for drugs. And those adverts for me stand out in two ways. They're for conditions I've never heard of, with drugs I've never heard of. And then at the end, this dude speaks really quickly, telling you all the risks that like basically like your leg might fall off or some shit. And it felt to me, I couldn't help but think, are they inventing conditions, or are they trying to treat conditions that don't really need treating? Does the medical industry fail because of capitalism? Does it fail the human?
I mean, what you described is disgusting. It definitely is the environment here. Yeah, I mean, I think, we live in a hyper-capitalistic environment. Everything is commercialized. You're a consumer, first and foremost. That's entirely what you've been designed to be since you were born in this very short blip of history. I didn't see so much of that in my research, because my research was more about, we were looking at pulmonary complications, post-traumatic brain injury. So what that means is you have a motorcycle accident, you end up in the ER, but you actually die from lung issues, not from the brain bleed. Your brain started to bleed, and these things called inflammasomes develop. So when you hit your wrist or you hit your knee, it inflames because it's designed to protect that protective tissue around the site of injury. But after a point in time, it becomes destructive. It starts to eat that tissue. So that's why you ice it. That's why you take NSAID. That's why you want to, reduce that inflammation. That's the first thing you do. But same thing happens in your brain. So you're an elderly patient, you fall, you have now inflammation in your brain, but those proteins end up traveling into your lungs. And within that 24-hour period in the hospital, you usually end up dying from breathing complications, not from the brain bleed.
Holy shit, I didn't even know any of this.
Yeah.
So how do they prevent that?
Well, that's the research we were doing, trying to figure out, or trying to develop drugs in order to prevent that.
But that seems like ethical drug development. That seems important work.
Yeah. Then it kind of gets into, how do you define which one's ethical and which one's not ethical? But ultimately, and it was interesting too, because, and maybe this applies to research more broadly, but I think the people that I was doing the research with, they knew the conclusion before they had done all of the research ahead of time. So again, they weren't leading they weren't sort of leading the witness or anything necessarily, but and that was probably more of a pure example of what maybe that sort of backwards research would look like.
Right.
But still, that existed. It's like, well, we know the conclusion. Now let's find supporting evidence to support that conclusion, and that seemed a bit backwards.
To get it through the FDA, is it?
Well, just to support the claim in this case.
Right. Okay.
So we assume that these patients are dying from pulmonary complications. We know there's inflammatory activity in the brain. We also happen to have a drug company that can develop it for us. Let's go and find the supporting research in order to make that happen.
Right.
So again, it probably isn't the most egregious example in the history of drug development and research, but if that existed at that level, then it must exist at a much more egregious level in other places.
Well, when you do the research, you look up the stats. I'm sure Danny can find it, but like the number of kids in the US who are on ADHD medication, or the number of kids who are on anxiety medication, the number of people who are using Adderall, the opioid deaths. Like it's always felt to me that I believe in capitalism itself, but it feels to me the US version of capitalism, when it hits the health system, it doesn't seem to benefit many people. apart from the drug companies and perhaps some of the doctors or the people within the system, but it doesn't benefit the customer. I feel like the customer is constantly getting fucked here. And that's the thing that like stands out to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a corporate system. It's they call it corporatocracy or corporate socialism. I mean, corporations are people in this country. That I think that's the essence of it.
But we have private medical in the UK. I have private medical care. I use a private doctor. I use the private system, but it still feels different. It doesn't feel like people are trying to, like when I go and see my private doctor, he isn't trying to get me to take drugs. He isn't trying to force drugs on me. I remember my last session with him, it was all about lifestyle, where I had all my blood tests done. My cholesterol was up. There was a couple of other things there. Some people listening would be like, just eat steak. We went through it, and he was like, I want you to make all these lifestyle changes and come back and see me in a month. So something goes different. Something goes wrong here in the US. Something different happens.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like they've been co-opted. I mean, these doctors get paid to speak at these conferences. It all does seem paid for play, and even if they don't realize it, it seems like it's seeped into their education at a core level as well. But in the UK, the NHS seems like it's weaker and weaker, or is getting weaker and weaker every day, right?
Yeah, I have a thesis on that. My thesis on that is the NHS is a wonderful institution. The idea behind it is brilliant. And I stand by that, whatever accusation comes at me, because you will find very few people in the UK, if you ask them, would you like to get rid of the NHS, who would say yes. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever situation you're in, if you've broken your leg, if you've been run over, if you've been stabbed, if you had a heart attack or a stroke, you will get seen. Now, emergency care is being stretched, but it's still available. The waiting lists on certain conditions are significant. So if you have money, you should probably take up private healthcare, because if you get cancer, there are some waiting lists and there are risks to you. But everyone will get seen. Nobody's going to have their entire financial situation completely destroyed because they break a leg, or they get run over, or they have a heart attack and they don't have insurance. That is a great system to have, I think, in society. I think that reflects a civil, developed society. But my thesis on why it's been stretched so much is because when the NHS was developed, the kind of things you were getting treated for, we didn't have these unbelievable kind of scanners and MRI systems. It was very basic care. Now we've had all the technological advancements in medical care. We've had all the developments in drugs, and the drugs are expensive. We're better at keeping people alive and fixing people, but that comes at a cost. And so that's an increase in burden on the NHS. But I think I think most people you talk to in the UK, there are some very basic, easy changes you can make. I think people should be aware of the benefits of having some private cover if you can afford it. My private healthcare, this will probably amaze you. So I have private healthcare. It costs me, for me and my children, with the most expensive care possible. 2 kids, full cancer cover, immediately seen. If it's discovered that you have cancer, it costs me £180 a month, which is about $180 now.
That's insane.
But yeah, and so when I did my back in, and I had to have a microdiscotomy, from diagnosis to operation was 3 days. Now in the NHS, I don't know what it would be, weeks, months, Danny?
I mean, I have no idea.
You have no idea. And when my son had his shins issues, he was dealt with the doctor straight away in London. Now, some people cannot afford £180 a month or £150, whatever it would cost them. I mean, the average disposable income in the UK. Can you look that one up, Danny? Because I looked yesterday. I can't remember if it's a week or a month. But I saw it was about £176 a month. But I know plenty of people who can afford it and who don't have it. And they don't realize the benefit. They're going to have the benefit of having immediate care, but they're also going to take some strain off the NHS. But there are certain things the NHS could do better. They could charge for appointments. Just charge for appointments, because they have a real issue with people having appointments and not turning up. There are little things like they could do that. I think there could be a good mix. I think certain bits should be privatized, which is heresy to some people. But look, healthcare is a complicated subject. I mean, but I think America has it. I think America, you can get the best treatment in the world if you can afford it. You've probably got the best cancer treatments in the world, or some of the best. And a lot of people in the UK with cancer, especially kids, they've fundraised to go to the US to get treatment. It's a big thing. It happened to a friend of mine. His son had, I can't remember what form of cancer, but he got treated in the US and survived. He's alive today. But that was a treatment he couldn't get in the UK. But I feel like outside of that, the US also has one of the worst health systems in the world in terms of the customer.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to figure out is if that's a trade-off of the system. Like, we may have some of the best cancer treatment facilities in the world. Is that at a trade-off of having this consumeristic culture? It might be. I think it seems like it is.
Well, America seems to have the best of everything, right?
Yeah.
At a certain time.
The worst of a lot of stuff too.
Well, that's a lot of stuff. But like the way your capitalist system's set up for investment and winners and losers, and the culture of competition and being the best, Silicon Valley for a long time. I mean, pretty much the majority of the best tech companies are US-based, search engines, whatever. You get the odd outlier like a Spotify, but generally speaking, the US has got the majority of them. And I think your system is set up to create winners and losers, and that's just the way it is. Whereas I think we're set up just to be kind of average.
Yeah, and again, you get that massive spectrum when you have a system like that. You have people that outperform, at an exponential rate, and then you have a lot that are suffering at the same time. So again, I just think it's a matter of trade-off. It's not really good or bad. It's just it's what the system can offer to who and when.
There was a long time where I wanted to come and live here in the US because I like it. I've been here. This is probably like my 100th time here. I come 8 times a year. I absolutely love it. The people are great. The food's great. Get treated really nicely. Made some great friends. But there was always 2 things that put me off coming to live here permanently. One was the health system, because it just freaked me out because I didn't even understand it. And trying to get your head around that, it's a complicated pick. When you're used to having one number to phone or one place to go to get treated and it'll not cost you anything, to come to the US system where I've heard, like I had a friend, his daughter hurt herself surfing. They phoned the wrong ambulance company and he got hit with a $2,000 bill or something.
Yeah.
Because he got the wrong one. Those kind of things freak me out. The other thing that put me off was the exit tax, if you ever change your mind.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme. I don't know exactly what the rate is. Is it? I think it's like 40 or 50%. It's something
like that.
Something insane.
Did you find that average?
Yeah, it was £175 a month disposable income.
Yeah, I've been making this film in the UK about inflation, so I had to look that up.
Okay.
Because the cost of living is going up so much. It's like, how much breathing room do people have? The average disposable income in the UK is £175 a month, which isn't much breathing room.
And your insurance is 180 or something.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people who just don't have that. But there are also people who can. I know plenty of people who don't have it, who could afford it, and they should have it because it benefits them.
Yeah.
And that will take the pressure off the system.
The thing I've heard is that it's incredibly good if you have a life-threatening condition, but if it's something simple like getting seen, it's a pain in the ass. It's almost impossible.
Yeah. So if you're stabbed, you'll be taken to the hospital and you'll be treated immediately. If you have a heart attack, you will be treated immediately. But there are instances where they're like, we can't get an ambulance to that because there's pressures on the system. But that is true. Life-threatening immediate things. Where if you have like my microdiscotomy, my herniated disc, I couldn't sit down when I had that happen. I had to be stood up or laying down because if I sat down, the pressure on my disc was causing shooting pains in the leg, the sciatica, which is unfucking bearable. I don't know what the wait time is, but with something like that, or Danny, you did your knee.
Yeah, but that was in Australia.
But if you were in the UK, if you went in and they said, your operation's in 3 months, you wouldn't be surprised, right?
And not at all, no. And it was similar in Australia, to be fair. And they have like a private-public hybrid system. It's quite confusing. But it actually works quite well. So if you do, it's like what you're sort of suggesting. If you go to the GP or whatever, you have to pay like, I don't know, $100 or something. And then they rebate you a certain amount. And when you get to sort of, I think 30 or 31, if you earn over a certain amount, you have to get private health insurance or they like deduct you in your tax.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
So they expect you've got your shit together by 31?
Yeah.
How old are you now?
31.
You've been hit with that? Well, I thought that was true.
Yeah, well, I got private healthcare for the first time like last year or something.
How much is it?
I think it's about $400 a month for me and my wife.
Okay, what's that in pounds?
That's
not far.
230, 200 or something like that.
So is it in some ways where you have to take out that insurance, is that kind of like national insurance in the UK, but you're paying it directly rather than having it taken from your wage?
No, it's still like you go direct to Bupa or whatever and buy your...
Ah, okay. So we have a tax in the UK called national insurance, which both employers and employees pay. And I think it's... What's NI? Is it 12%?
I have no idea. I'll have a look.
Yeah, so I think as a company, you pay for every employee you have. I think you pay 12% of their salary as national insurance, and then you pay it as an individual. And I think they're trying to put that up recently. And then
13.25%.
is that an individual? Mm-hmm. Right. But anyway, so it's another tax that's meant to pay for the national health service.
Yeah.
But what's actually happened is it's just goes into the big government pot of wastage.
Is there any transparency on where those funds are used for?
Fuck knows. Possibly. I fucking doubt it. I doubt it.
But kind of going back to what you were saying before, I agree that if you asked everyone in the UK, do you want to get rid of the NHS? 99% would say no. But I think most would say it probably needs to change.
Yeah. There is a lot of bureaucratic waste. So my mum worked in the NHS. She was a nurse, an incredible nurse, my mum. And she's a bit like me. She'll say what she thinks. And she used to come home and just complain about all the middle management coming in with these fucking ideas and interfering. She's just said it was bullshit. There is a lot of waste.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing is, it's a political... If you came in as a politician and said we need to privatize the NHS, you will not get voted into power.
Yeah.
It's like an institution that we hold dear in the UK and we protect. And even there was a time when the Conservatives wanted to privatize parts of it, and the accusation was that they're selling off the NHS to their corporate friends, which they probably were, but it's a very difficult thing to change in the UK.
I think that I thought something like that happened in the 90s with public schooling, right? Wasn't there one political party in the UK that advocated for, I think schools were all public then, and then they ended up privatizing it, going against public sentiment?
No, we've always had I don't think so. We've always had no, you might be talking about...
That'll be with the grammar schools, presumably.
Yeah. So we've got three types of schools. We've got public schools, grammar schools, and private schools. Grammar schools are essentially public schools, which tend to be a higher standard. They almost tend to reflect the private schools in terms of the standard. But I don't know too much of the background, so we don't have any grammar schools in Bedford where I'm from.
But I think, I don't know, this was before my time, but I'm pretty sure it used to be like the smart kids go to grammar school.
Yeah.
And then a lot of those grammar schools became privatized.
I'm not sure if do you want to check that? I don't know if the private... yeah, but basically my niece and nephew both go to a grammar school, and you have to do a test. I think it's called is it the 9+ or the 12+? There's certain tests you have to do to get in.
The 11+.
11+. So you have to separate. So they separate the smartest kids to give them the opportunity to learn. Now, some people, like some people will be like, well, this is not fair. You're making an elite group of people. But but sometimes that's okay because you want to get the best for these kids. You want to give them the best education, the best people to teach them. They still exist. But I don't know about privatizing them. Danny might find something.
Yeah, the NHS almost seems like a national myth, and I love national myths.
Yeah,
that's at least how it comes across. It seems like it was something that was great, and people are clinging on to the idea that it was great, but it's no longer great anymore.
Yeah, it's
tough to shake that.
I think you've nailed it there. I can see as an outsider who doesn't use it anymore, I see the issues with it, but I also still love the fact that people have the opportunity to use it. There's other things that have stretched into as well as a lot of people figured out they could get paid more money by going through agencies. So a lot of agency staff now work for the NHS, whereas it would have all been direct employees before. But the NHS needs the staff, and if they can't get direct access to the nurses and doctors, they have to go through these agencies where they pay a lot more money. So it is a complicated matter. I do like the idea of universal healthcare. I know that goes massively against what a number of people, maybe libertarians, think or certain Bitcoiners think because of the problems that causes. But I like the idea that anyone can get access to healthcare, especially the least fortunate. Yeah. And I'm sure, it's one of those things I should probably give Stefan Avera a call and say, like, talk to me about this, because he'll have a great explanation as how you can have a different system which still supports people who can't afford healthcare. So, they're probably...
I mean, some of this might be an issue of just nation states more broadly. There's just a lot of people in one place, and we're all being held accountable for each other, but we don't really have a common point of connection.
Yes.
That's what I keep coming back to for almost any issue for the most part.
Expand on that.
I think we're all too big. I think nation states are well, there have been nation states in the past, there have been empires in the past, but it seems like a consequence of our post-industrialized world where, I mean, you can look at the U.S., for example. There's a lot of geography between us. I think we're as united as the Soviet Union was, keyword on union. There isn't a whole lot of commonality between, Florida and California, for example, almost like different countries. Texas and Massachusetts, these almost look like different countries. I think to a certain extent, it's because people are tribal and they're very community oriented. And when you have too many people in one place, it doesn't function as well. And we try and duct tape things together to make it function, but it's kind of bursting. It's kind of leaking through all that.
What's the population in the US? Is it 300 million? 320
I think
million?
360 or 70 million.
360 million. Well, that's a lot of people to try and centrally plan for.
Yeah.
I've traveled a lot around the US, and the commonality is the language, but there's a lot of differences between somebody I've hung out with in Wyoming and somebody I've hung out with in Malibu.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fundamentally different people with completely different outlooks on life.
Well, and to exacerbate the issue, New York and London have much more in common than New York and like Oshkosh or, Des Moines, Iowa or some other place. Cities just have more in common than they do with their own kin in their own country.
Do you think this is why it's been fracturing?
Yeah, I think it's, a multi-generational thing. It's not like, this is happening in the last 5 years or last couple decades. I think things ebb and flow, and we're naturally just going to move towards a more localized sort of city-state model. I think it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It seems like it's naturally getting to that point because these big countries are just breaking. Yeah.
Sometimes I also think that maybe comes down to like your age as well, because I'm older than you, I think. I started to notice as I get older and I slow down, I want to spend more time locally in my community, helping out and doing things within my community. Whereas I think you're young, you want to get out and see the world and move around and like meet people and go through exciting opportunities. Then you get a bit older and a bit wiser and you realize actually you can get most of what you need from your local community. Everything you've been taught to believe that you should want to get out of life doesn't really make you happy like you think it will. Like I'm happiest on a Tuesday night going down to Allen Park and watching my daughter train football and being amongst the community and watching all these kids play football and hang out. That's where I'm my happiest. But I used to think I'd be my happiest getting on a plane and flying to California and making a podcast and then going down the beach. And it was fun at the time, but I realized that like it's not fulfilling.
Yeah, it's seemingly attractive, but I think once you do it and once you do it enough, you realize it's actually, and I'm not speaking to your example specifically, but a lot of these things are actually quite empty. I think it's a natural human inclination to want to be around your community. It's like we're tribal, we're animals, we're tribal. I think a lot of the stuff that we see in like the general crypto space more broadly is because money is very tribal. So people become tribal about that too. But you need to have some sort of, weight within a group of people that you may be accountable for, but you can also see a direct output from your input. Like maybe you're employing some people in your local community. That fulfills you. That gives you a good sense of maybe you want to be a tribal leader or some, idea of a tribal leader in your own head. Like that is incredibly fulfilling. It's more fulfilling than, going out to a club in Vegas or in Miami for a couple nights and kind of ending up alone.
Yeah. I mean, you've literally been within my community. You've seen it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm happiest.
It's beautiful, honestly.
And building something for a small group of people that they can get behind and feel happy about. And, one of the things we were talking about last night, our mayor in Bedford is a fucking moron. He's useless. Dave the mayor, honestly, he's fucking useless. And like, I've been thinking about maybe that's what I should be, not trying to build this podcast and traveling. Like I should be there in my community doing the job that he can't do and he's doing because nobody else wants it. Maybe that's what I should be doing. Like if you want a legacy, what is it? Do you want your legacy to be someone famous and successful, like did all this shit? Or do you want your legacy to be the change that you made for people? And I think maybe this is another thing coming back to the capitalism. Capitalism and advertising has taught us that the big shiny stuff's important. Mm-hmm. But actually, I think real kind of inner peace and contentment comes from what you've done for other people.
Are you officially announcing you're running for mayor of Bedford?
My official announcement, Dave the Mayor, I'm coming for you, motherfucker. I want to do it. My issue, I was actually, if I show you my Google, so I was Googling last night, is it a full-time job and what's involved? What do you actually have to do? And the amount of things I already found, I think are absolutely ridiculous. But I think it's close to a full-time job.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Which is a problem. So it has to become in a post what Bitcoin did era. But I will.
I think it depends on the person. I think you would probably make it a full-time job, and maybe the person in the current role isn't treating it as a full-time job.
No, he's honestly is an idiot. Can I get sued for calling someone an idiot?
No.
Okay.
Well, you're in a different country right now, so I think it's fine, right? Like international waters.
No, it doesn't work like that.
No.
But I think you're saying an idiot is fine.
I just don't want to get sued again.
We'll run it past the lawyers.
Running past the lawyers, Rupert will be okay with this.
But no, to go back to that, I think you're right. Like affecting change in people's lives is really important. On your podcast, you do it at a massive scale. But I really love tactile physical relationships. So if there's only a handful of people whose lives you can directly affect in like a truly life-changing way, then that might be more fulfilling. It depends on the person.
Well, in some ways, goes back to the Bitcoin thing and trying to explain Bitcoin to people, especially I have to do a lot in my local community now because I have this club and we have Bitcoin badge and we're the Bitcoin team. So I have to explain it to them. But the truth is, like most of the people, the question they want to ask is, or they do ask, is now a good time to buy?
Yeah.
Everyone's worried about buying it and it going down. Everyone wants to buy it, wants to go up. I've been increasingly trying to say to them, the great thing about Bitcoin is the things it teaches you. And by the way, I'm always like behind the curve on it a little bit more than other Bitcoiners, but teaching you that appreciation of money or what money is or how it works, how it doesn't work is super fascinating. I mean, it's been great, watching my brother orange pill himself. Mm-hmm. My brother is a Bitcoiner now. Like when he first came in, he was working with us and he's traditionally on the left and a lot of things he struggled to get his head around. He now gets it. Like I've had to do the same. You have to learn about money. And we're in this period of time where everything's fucking breaking. And people keep going, well, the Bitcoiners were right. The Bitcoiners predicted this. The Bitcoiners said this. But also there's this secondary thing where you slow down and you start to realize the important things in life. Again, I'm behind the curve on everyone on this, but you should look after your health. You should eat good food. You should spend time in your community. You should go and see your local farmer. We should stop eating this bullshit food that we've been put in front of us and told is okay. All those things that Bitcoin teaches you outside of the gains, I think actually that's in some ways more important.
Yeah.
Because it structures you towards a better life for you and your family. It gets you away from all the fake bullshit.
You had a guest who said it beautifully. I forgot his name. I think it's Bollinger?
Logan.
Bollinger. Yeah, mm-hmm. Logan's great.
Yeah, I was just listening to it yesterday and he said Bitcoin allows you to think about things other than money, or it gives you the opportunity to think about things other than money. And I think that's right. You can't plan for generations in the current system. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And that's also, I mean, just alongside the community aspect, like that is a core part of being human is wanting to plan and care for your family in this case. And it's impossible to do that today. You have to take a second job as a trader. You have to constantly think about, like your chance of beating inflation, which is getting harder and harder day by day. In some countries, it's actually impossible. So yeah, I think Bitcoin gives us that opportunity. If I have a long-term perspective, I don't have to worry about things that I would have to worry about otherwise. And that is incredibly freeing. And maybe that's what freedom ultimately looks like.
Yeah, it's some big, and actually you also have to think about, or for me, I've found really hard discarding things like an onion, like shedding parts of like my skin of my old life. And there's a lot about to think about with that. Firstly, it's, long-term common held beliefs. Like I'm with somebody who's always loved the role of a journalist and journalism, and coming to the realization that we have very few real journalists left doing proper objective work is mildly depressing. Mm-hmm. I'm somebody who has absolutely supported democracy for years. We're in a time where it's very hard to support right now, especially in the UK. We've got this fucking idiot as our prime minister. We've got another idiot who's just had his conference recently, Keir Starmer, who's come out with a whole bunch of new policies that Labour are going to put in place. And you realize the cycle's the same. That's a hard skin to shed when you've believed in it for so long. There's so many of these things that it's really difficult to kind of like go. And there's another reason it's difficult is when you start to shed these skins and you start talking to your friends about it, you sound like a nutter.
Yeah, you do.
Like Bitcoiners think I'm a status. My friends think I'm a nutter. They think I'm an absolute crazy person.
Yeah, but that's a good place to be. That's I have this quote that I try not to actually live by it, but it seems like inevitably happens where it's society honors its living conformists and its dead troublemakers. Ooh. And I find that
who's that from?
I don't remember. We can look it up. Maybe
say that again.
Society honors its living conformists and its dead troublemakers.
Yeah,
and it's usually true. You can look at our history, for example. George Washington was kind of hated during, in his time. You can look at Gandhi, hated as well. Now, depending on the people and depending on who you're looking at, but it seems like people that have sort of maybe contradictory or revolutionary ideas are hated by a large group of people because the status quo is comfortable. You're presenting a radical change in how people fundamentally think about everything on a day-to-day basis, and that's very uncomfortable. It takes a certain type of person to think that way.
Do you have a favorite quote you ever go to?
I don't have a favorite quote I go to, but one of the things that I do think about all the time is something Mark Moss said on the show, where he said, what was it? For every new law, whether good or bad, means less freedom. And I think that's quite good.
We talked about that a lot, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Because we didn't 100% agree with it.
No, but it's something I just think about a lot.
Yeah.
I don't even know how you say this journalist's name, so I'm going to pull it up here.
Mignon McLaughlin.
Oh, that's why I couldn't remember because I can't pronounce it.
A successful marriage requires falling in love many times, always with the same person. I have a favorite quote. So, do you know Jiddu Krishnamurti?
No.
It's like this Indian philosopher. And this one always stays with me. It never leaves me. He said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And I've never actually looked up what he meant by that. Maybe you can look it up. But what I read in that is that if you're successful in current society, but your success leads to a net negative impact on other people and the planet, have you really been successful?
Then you have to evaluate what that output is, though, right? That's tough.
Yeah. I just, it makes me think directionally, parts of capitalism have sent us in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly obvious.
Well, for some people, I mean, again, like some people like this high time preference life.
Yeah. But it goes back to the point I was trying to say is like, I'm starting to realize, like, I've always wanted to earn and be successful.
Yeah.
And now I'm at the point of thinking, like, being involved in my community has made me realize I want to be more involved in it. And that's more important than money.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, this is meant to be about you, not me. Let's talk about Hoseki. Because you've solved a problem for me, dude.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, how long? When do we get it?
A couple weeks.
Sweet. So, we hold Bitcoin reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be transparent about those Bitcoin reserves on our website for our football club. And the only way I could do that is by providing the ZPub.
Mm-hmm. What's a ZPub?
Right. So you're such a dick. I fucking hate this stuff. So an XPub is the extended public key, which you derive all your addresses from. The ZPub is something which I went onto a link that Lot provided me, which I got from my XPub. I converted my XPub into a ZPub. I don't fucking know what a ZPub is, Danny. What is it?
Do you want to go, Sam?
You dig. You don't. Do you know what it is?
It's the thing that it's the key which will make all your extended public keys viewable. Correct? Kind of.
I'm not going to correct you guys in public.
Go on.
Yeah, do it. That's basically it. I mean, we focus on the XPubs, and most people just use XPubs.
So I finally got my head around XPubs, and then I was trying to provide the. By the way, welcome to What Bitcoin Did, experts in Bitcoin. If you want tech expertise, please go to Stefan Livera's podcast or any other podcast. I wanted to provide it, but I couldn't. People couldn't get the balance from it. And then so I just found some article that said, no, you have to do it from the ZPub. And I found this tool that Lot provided that you can convert your XPub to your ZPub. I don't know this stuff. This stuff gets explained to me and I forget it.
Well, it's it's low level. This is actually very low level. I mean, I don't think many people are.
No, it's high level.
Well, it's low level in the sense that it's at the core building blocks, which is why it's so complicated. No, the high level is actually pretty easy.
Yeah, well, I've got it up there. I've got people can scan it and they can confirm that we've got the amount of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
you heard about this?
Yeah. Well, XPub lookups generally are not many block explorers provide that, just because it's more difficult to have a functioning block explorer with just XPub lookups purely.
And then we got introduced by a mutual friend.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about proof of reserves.
Yeah.
We talk about proof of assets, but we're using the terms interchangeably now because, if certain people understand one brand, it's tough to sort of try and re-engineer that. It's better to go with the flow than to try and reconstruct the whole wheel. So our service allows you to do the same thing without having to disclose what the XPub is. So it's more of providing you with some level of transparent, or with more privacy rather. So you can be more private about your wallet details.
It's a proof of reserves.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the problem with exposing the XPub?
Well, you may not want that detail out in the world, especially for individuals and retail customers. If you have to prove you have Bitcoin to several different counterparties, you're not going to have to leak your wallet details to several different people.
So what else does it? Can it leak other information by making that publicly available?
Yeah, you can run analytics. You can look at where the transactions came from, where they're going in perpetuity. So yeah, it is quite. It can be quite dangerous, again, depending on the person and the use case.
And is that the same with the ZPub being public?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't mind it with the football club because all we do is hold the Bitcoin. We've not moved any. We're not spending any. It's a company. And when I read that, I was like, well, I'm totally fine with this. But as an individual, I would definitely not want that public.
Yeah.
And so the way your tool does it is how?
So it's basically it's giving us the information and then us giving a check mark to whoever the counterparties are. So in that sense, you're not doxing to N, you're not doxing to 100 or 1,000 people. It's to one, and we provide that verification. So it's private in the sense that you're not having to give that detail to 100 people. We will simply take on the burden of giving that verification as long as they trust us.
Right. Okay. And so the opportunity here is like, okay, it's great for me because I can do a proof of reserves, but like, I don't think there's a huge amount of companies who are going to need to do that and make that a long-term viable commercial business for you. That's not where the real opportunity is, right?
No, this is really showcasing what the product can do. Yeah. There's a bunch of different applications. We sort of see it as this bottom stack of the Bitcoin standard stack of the future.
Okay.
Proof of ownership is sort of a basic characteristic of any asset class, be it stocks, bonds, or whatever else, which is why I love what we're building, because I can explain this to anyone, Bitcoiner or not, and they'll understand it. A function of building a Bitcoin company, and I think any company, is you're an evangelist of the thing and the technology, in this case, Bitcoin. So anyone running a Bitcoin company has to evangelize Bitcoin. But in my case, I don't have to, actually. It's just, look, you need to prove, you have this asset, you need to prove you own it. You need some kind of framework around it.
What are the scenarios, though, where people will need to prove they own it?
Yeah, I mean, it's already happening now. Our go-to-market was mortgages.
Okay.
And that was my problem. You're self-custodying your assets. You need to prove to a broker that you have Bitcoin. But how do you do that? You could maybe take a screenshot of like your Trezor UI or whatever software or whatever wallet you're using.
Which you can fake the fuck out of.
You can fake it. It's also very primitive and crude. And also like we're on the bleeding edge of technology, but we're relegated to taking screenshots. It doesn't make any sense. And if they don't dismiss you outright, they ask you to send your funds to Coinbase, for example, and print out a statement. But again, like you're self-custodying. That's antithetical to the reason why you're self-custodying in the first place.
Yeah, and Coinbase will then take that information and pass it over to other third parties, which you don't want to do as a Bitcoiner.
Exactly.
Maybe.
So that's been our go-to-market, but residency applications has been a big one. People trying to use this jurisdictionless asset to be global citizens, and even things in the judicial realm as well. We're helping one user prove he has funds in order to support his case for getting custody of his kids, for example. One of his assets is Bitcoin.
Right.
The idea isn't to have people extend you credit just because you happen to have Bitcoin at this point in time, like at this stage of like maturation of the asset. It's more of having your Bitcoin play as a financial data point. Right now, if you have it in cold storage, it is the shiny rock. It's amazing. You should sit on it, but there isn't anything else you can do short of selling it or moving it. And I don't think that should be the case.
And you're essentially building this out in preparation for the direction the financial world is heading in.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because you said, I'm pretty sure if I got a mortgage in the UK and I had to prove my assets, at the moment, no one would accept Bitcoin as an asset they would approve of as a proof of that I can afford something, right? But in the US, you are starting to see that transitional change. Like Bitcoin is starting to integrate into. My sponsor Ledden, they have a mortgage product now, which is Bitcoin based as well. Like, who is it? Bill Barhart was talking about it as well. We're starting to see that the asset from certain people in certain areas is being respected. Haven't Goldman Sachs even got a product now for borrowing against Bitcoin?
I think they announced something, yeah.
Silvergate have. We know Silvergate are Bitcoin friendly, but they have a product. Like, we're starting to see that transition, I think, a bit more here, less so in the UK. I mean, you can barely find a bank account in the UK that will allow you to have Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But so you starting to see that change, that some institutions are accepting it?
Yeah, we are. And we're partnering with Ledden as an example. We love them over there. Yeah, we are. And it's also not as daunting as you might expect because the incentives are aligned, at least in the mortgage use case. The broker wants you to get approved. So they're going to try and support you however they can in order to get you approved because that's how they get paid. Oftentimes, you'll be surprised. All they want is something that looks official, which in our case is literally just a bank-like looking statement. So someone connects their Trezor, connects their Cold Card, connects whatever wallets they have or exchange accounts, and then prints out a statement for the last 3 months that shows their beginning monthly balance or ending monthly balance, and then all of the line items, which would be Coinbase, Kraken, and then randomize account numbers for those wallets. So, for example, they don't ever get your address or your XPub. They get some randomized account number because they don't need or want that level of detail. All they want is some bank-like looking statement with a letterhead, your name and address, and your assets listed, which is what we provide now.
In dollar value?
Both the Bitcoin and the dollar value.
Both Bitcoin and the dollar value.
So the next thing, obviously, is to add more currencies.
So they're ticking a box.
Yeah.
What other currencies?
No, like different. So pound, euro.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to need the pound, man.
Yeah, exactly.
And very soon you could just do an instant conversion of 1-to-1 because we know that's how much a pound's going to be worth. Fucking sick. That must have been a super cheap holiday for you to come to the UK.
I was over there when it was happening and my family was losing their mind, but I was secretly sort of smiling.
Yeah. I mean, it's been crazy to see what's been happening in the UK, but like all my American friends are coming and they're like, we're going to come to the UK. It's super cheap at the moment. I'm like, yeah, it's not super cheap for me to come to you.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll last either. I
don't know. We're going to talk to a couple of people about that very soon. There's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. We've jumped around a little bit here. Well, actually, just before let's finish up with Hoseki. Like, tell people where to check it out anyway. Just like, and is the product available commercially yet?
In 2 weeks, it'll be good.
Fully commercially out there.
So we have. I mean, now you can sign up on the wait list, and then if you email me, I can grab you onto our alpha. So you can do what I'm describing now today.
Yeah.
But you'll be able to sign up and do it without a private alpha link in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long has it taken to get this far?
Well, it's been about a year total. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to get built out. It sounds simple when you describe it, but honestly, it's, for example, we didn't want to use third parties.
Right.
So everything we had to build was in-house. And that took a while and took a lot of thought. So it's been about a year.
I also like the thing about your company is that you don't really just look like a Bitcoin company. You just look like a tech startup.
Okay.
Like a software business, like a SaaS.
Okay.
Which I think is directionally where I think some of the Bitcoin companies are heading, which I think is a good thing. I think it reflects where Bitcoin is going to, where we are just becoming part of the kind of mainstream financial system.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love Bitcoin culture. I just don't know if that's applicable to the world as a whole. There's a lot of different sort of things in the world, and you should probably try and combine that in your company. So we try and look friendly. That's sort of the branding.
What does the name mean?
Hoseki?
Yeah.
It's a nod to Nick Szabo's article, Shelling Out.
Okay, yeah.
It means jewelry.
Huh.
People see Bitcoin as different things. I kind of see it as jewelry. So in the past, different civilizations would use, as you know, different things for money, and seashells were used at one point.
Yeah.
So in Massachusetts, the Narragansett used wampum belts. These were belts that were created with seashells, and that had a very slow velocity of money. It transferred hands when tribes would unify, when babies were born, when marriages would happen. And that's kind of how I see Bitcoin's block time. I see that 10-minute finality as actually being incredibly fucking important. And it's not something trivial. And this idea that, we can kind of use Bitcoin for every transaction, I think is a little bit short-sighted. And so I see it as like this incredibly momentous thing every time a block is added, sort of like when these seashells would transfer hands. But also, if you look at India, gold jewelry-backed lending was up, I think, 200 some percent last year.
Wow.
Versus regular lending, which is up like 8%. Different societies use jewelry as money oftentimes as well.
Have you been to India?
No.
It's an amazing country.
Really?
Yeah, it's up there with probably my 3 favorite places I've ever been. I absolutely loved it. And I was in Goa, and I went up to like the little local town.
Is that in the south?
Yes, I think it's the southwest.
Okay.
Will you check that for me, Danny? Yeah, it was short. It wasn't too long a flight from Mumbai, and a beautiful place, amazing people. Again, great food, and cows on the beach, which was really weird. Literally the friendliest people you'll ever meet. People just stop and talk to you. They just want to talk to you and find out who you are and what you're about. But you go into the town, and the number of like jewelers was incredible. They were just everywhere, and because this is where people pass down their inheritance, right? It's the gold that they buy the gold, they hold the gold. They're pretty smart people. They know what they're doing with the shit. That's their Bitcoin.
Exactly.
I'd recommend going there.
So do you think in the future people lend out against your Bitcoin at different rates depending on where you're holding it?
I think not just that, it's that you can actually get a better rate because you can prove that you can pay it because you have transparency over the ownership.
But do you think the lenders will give you a different rate, whether it's on Coinbase or like in your own, cold storage is what I mean, like because they'll have a different trust model for each of those places?
Possibly. I mean, I can see it going that route. I don't immediately think it'll go that route, at least not yet, because it's still kind of poorly understood by the lender, unless you have a sophisticated lender. So if you have like a Ledin, for example, they know what they're doing. But for regular normie lenders, they don't understand the concepts of holding your own keys. That's just poorly understood at this point. So maybe.
Interesting.
Is there anything I've not asked you about with Hoseki that you want to talk about?
We could go that route, but again, it depends on how much time you have.
I've got plenty of time. You tell me.
Sure. Just on like...
Are you supporting Lightning?
No.
Never?
We're looking at it.
But then I guess when people have to prove their reserves, they're probably not going to need to prove their $200 of Lightning. It's probably not going to make that much of a difference.
Depends on who the counterparty is, but yeah, generally no.
And is it because it's just too complicated to do right now?
It's quite complex. I mean, Lightning doesn't have a topology, so it's difficult to figure those things out. So yeah, it doesn't naturally give you an ability to audit it the same way Bitcoin does.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what did you want to cover then? Because I've got time.
I guess the idea that we're sort of like Bitcoiners kind of are third world citizens, or like these digital third world citizens, is what I've been focused on. I don't think we see it that way, but I definitely think we are.
Explain that.
Well, this thing's new. It's incredibly, we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, but it's still very mechanical. There isn't like great experiences around using it, especially in self-custody. We have our own political and civil sort of strife and problems, and we've had mass migrations of people coming in and people leaving, people
have been exiled.
People have been exiled by mobs and also by individuals. So I really see us as third world citizens, and more importantly, we have the same financial problems as the third world does, in the sense that we don't have a good way of representing our assets. So there's a book that I've read called The Mystery of Capital, and that describes why, in this author's opinion, the global south or third world, whatever you want to call it, is incredibly poor as it relates to the West. So North America, Europe, and Japan. And it's got nothing to do with IQ or market orientation or your culture. Because if you go to some of these countries, if you go to Turkey and you go to a bazaar in Turkey, you're going to get hassled by entrepreneurial people your entire journey. They're incredibly industrious. But the problem is they actually don't have a way to represent their assets. They don't have property rights built in. And Bitcoin has that. That's the one thing Bitcoin does really well, is that it has these property rights that allow you to enforce the fact that you do own Bitcoin. And so that's what I'm most focused on, is building a great wrapper and experience around that. Much like multi-sig companies, you can make a multi-sig custody regime without these companies. It just isn't a good experience.
Nope.
At all.
I've looked at it.
Yeah.
There's zero chance I could do it.
It's-
If I did, I would fuck it up, and most likely I'd lose my Bitcoin.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous. It is dangerous. Whereas Casa Unchained have built great products
Right.
for people to be able to not fuck it up.
Now, luckily for expression of ownership in Bitcoin, it's not dangerous because you're not moving funds, but it's still not easy. It's not well understood. I realized that when I was writing the paper on proof of reserves, and I just thought this is an incredibly underutilized part of the system.
Well, you've literally seen me try to do this without knowing there's a product that exists, and you can go, "Hi, Pete, I can help you with this. We've got a product." I'm like, "Great."
Well, you did the best thing you could have done with the tools available.
Yeah.
We're just now building better tooling in order to make it easier.
And commercially, like, how does this going to work for you guys?
Well, we're building this tool for both retail and for companies as well. So bigger companies would have, a bigger need in terms of lending agreements. Again, with respect to who their counterparties are. We see this as like an integration platform into different services. So you need to quickly prove you have Bitcoin on Rocket Mortgage. Well, we're plugged in. You can quickly just do that with us. There's a load of commercial models that can be developed if this infrastructure exists. So, yeah, we're not tethered to one thing necessarily.
Did you meet Jeremy earlier?
Yeah.
Jeremy is a Bitcoiner, but he's a really DID maximalist. And I can imagine him during all of this interview thinking, can you use this for proof of identity?
Yeah, I mean, you can. That's not something I promoted thus far just because the idea of like an address being your identity, I don't think is, I mean, maybe it's a good outcome. I don't necessarily see it. I think we're layers away from identity, but it is like we are building a stack of that.
Yeah, because we do have this problem at the moment where when we have to provide identity, we're giving away data that can be used and exploited.
Right.
Yeah, our privacy is destroyed continually. I mean, we're at the point where we just don't really have privacy anymore.
Digitally, none at all.
No.
Yeah. The thing I'm most excited about is applying this to a community banking model, which sort of goes back to my city states idea. I fundamentally view every single person who holds their own keys as an institution. I mean, we call ourselves banks.
Yeah.
Again, maybe I was scammed coming into Bitcoin when I was told that you can be your own bank, but I don't have any banking services. Like I'm my own bank, the funds are there, but I can't do anything. I can't do much with it.
Yeah, I know Chris over at Level was trying to do this. He was trying to break that mold. And I know other people have been trying to do it. Is there any kind of link to Fedimint with this then? Because you talk about community banking.
Possibly. I think at like a cultural level, their model is complicated to conduct proof of reserves, which is why they haven't done it thus far.
Right.
I know they're working on it. And if we can help, we definitely will. But I think the one thing that differentiates this type of community banking versus like the wildcat banking in the US in the 1800s is the auditability factor.
Yes.
Like you can have different, again, like you effectively are a country by having a treasurer is kind of how I see it. Like I see this like massive redistribution of wealth from nation states to individuals at this like quote unquote city state model.
So essentially banking is just going to become a peer-to-peer model.
Peer-to-peer, yeah. I mean, it is peer-to-peer because Bitcoin's peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
It'll just be now accessible to like many more people than it is today. And the fact that you can audit each thing is what differentiates it from things of the past. And that's a critical aspect of the protocol that again just isn't really I think it's incredibly underutilized.
And so have you found when building this company that you have been discovering new ideas and new applications by virtue of just building?
Yeah, I mean that and talking to people, and it's really important to discuss your ideas. I think we get into this trap of like, I'm building something, I need to just like focus and keep my head down and sort of realize my vision. But at the same time, like everything is synergistic. You have ideas at the same rate in time other people have ideas, and you hear from other people, and that influences your ideas. So yeah, I've learned, and things have sort of pivoted slightly and taken different and gone on different tangents, and all that's been really really helpful for our product. But yeah, it's kept its same core premise, but the way it manifests itself has changed over time.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, look, if people want to find out more about what you're doing, where should we send them?
www.hoseki.app, or on Hoseki app on Twitter, or you can follow me, Sam Abbassi, on Twitter.
Well, listen, I appreciate getting to know you. Thank you for coming to see my team. I'm looking forward to getting proof of reserves up on our website as soon as possible because we want to show that to people. And I'm excited for you to get this launched, to people start using it. I think you've got a bright future, man, and it's just great to get to know you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right, dude. Take care.